Ah, yes, it's time once again for Cannabis News. I'm your host, Joe Klare. It's October 14th, 2019. The show, as always, is presented to you by the Marijuana Times. You can find us at marijuanatimes.org. Click the video tab there to find the show. A lot of great articles there as well. A lot of great writers, social media links, everything you need to know about the cannabis world. We'll check out marijuanatimes.org for your answers today. We're talking about the increasing narrative that there's somehow a definitive link between marijuana use and mental illness. Also, a Quartz takes a look at some cannabis CEOs and how they use cannabis, and a halt to Texas medical marijuana licensing. What's up with that? We'll talk about all that coming up. But first, of course, yes, I'm trying to reach the youths with the show. That's our target demographic. Youths, the millennial generation, the people in their 20s. So that's why I say things like, what's up with that? And other various slang terms. The show is brought to you by Nature's Side. natureside.com and their organic, all natural pesticides. Make sure you grow safe and poison free. Don't use harmful chemicals. Don't use this awful, awful things that people put on plants that others are going to be ingesting. That's dumb. Don't be dumb. Be smart. Don't be dumb like everybody says. Be smart with Nature's Side. Nature-side.com, proud sponsor of Cannabis News, now for well over 500 episodes. Thank you, Nature's Side. This first story is by yours truly at marijuanatimes.org. A definitive link between marijuana and mental illness? ? Basically, I used a op-ed from Australia, and I kind of did a little rebuttal, a little breakdown of it. As I point out in the article, it's pretty even-handed when it comes to legalization. Obviously, you remember we talked about it on the show, and you probably read about it as well. The Australian Capital Territory has legalized adult-use marijuana. Federal officials in Australia Capital Territory, it's kind of analogous to, the Washington, D.C. area here. It's the area where the capital is. They have their own laws or whatever. They're not federal laws. They're more kind of like, quote-unquote state laws, but they're not states. Anyway, they legalized recreational marijuana. The Prime Minister, the Health Minister, everybody's up in arms. They don't like it. There's been talk of maybe superseding it with federal law or doing something else to halt its inaction. In any case, this op-ed was on a news site in Australia, and as I said, it tries to be as fair as it can be when it comes to the notion of cannabis legalization. But there is one problem that I had. This specific paragraph. Well, later in the article, he quotes Alex Berenson, which is quite embarrassing. But the specific paragraph I had a problem with is this. While it's been argued that those predisposed to psychotic mental illnesses are more likely to use cannabis, it's becoming increasingly accepted in the scientific community that there is a direct link between cannabis and these illnesses. That is simply not true. First of all, there's no proof of that in the op-ed. He cherry picks a couple studies, links to them. Out of hundreds of studies on this issue, he links to a few. That's the basis of his conjecture that it's becoming increasingly accepted in the scientific community that there is a direct link between cannabis and these illnesses. That is not a thing. I don't even know, as I point out in the article, I don't even know how you would quantify something like that. It's just a statement that has nothing to back it up, and it furthers this narrative, which is increasing in other quarters, and prohibitionists are starting to latch onto this, especially since Alex Berenson's book, that somehow marijuana use has been directly linked to things like violence, psychosis, mental illness, that sort of thing, and there simply is no definitive link. As I pointed out before when we talked about Alex Berenson, even the people who did the research that he cites have come out and said that he has misconstrued what they've said. There's associations, there may be a link, things of this nature, and a lot more research needs to be done, especially when it comes to adolescent marijuana use and psychosis. But the notion that there's some sort of definitive link and that the scientific community is increasingly accepting this as a whole is simply not true and is not backed up by any proof whatsoever in the op-ed. And as I said later on, towards the end of the op-ed, the quotes from Alex Berenson are just embarrassing and prove that you're not serious about cannabis journalism or punditry or whatever it is you're trying to do. Next up, from QZ.com, Quartz, if you will. 6 cannabis CEOs talk to us about how they use weed Obviously, all articles that I talk about are linked in the description of the video in which they are talked about. But this one's pretty interesting. 6 CEOs spoke to courts at work. They will gladly tell you how and why they consume cannabis products, sometimes at the office, perhaps multiple times per day. They're not being reckless with their corporate reputations. They run a small to medium-sized companies in one of the 11 U.S. states or in the Capital District where recreational marijuana is legal and cannabis is routinely compared to everyday drugs like caffeine and alcohol. As representatives of the modern cannabis sector, touting health and wellness, they're eager to cast cannabis as a normal aid in daily life, including life at work. Some of the CEOs include Max Simon, CEO of Greenflower, a California-based cannabis education and training platform. He says he's a daily consumer of the plant's extract. Every morning before work and again right after lunch, he takes 3 to 5 milligrams of pure THC tincture. It also contains MCT, medium-chain triglycerides oil, and he microdoses with tinctures throughout the day. Most of the other CEOs say they either use after they get home from work, kind of like, a glass of wine with dinner, a glass, to unwind after work, a couple beers, whatever. And those who use it during the day, most of them, obviously the first one uses THC. Most of them during the day tend to use CBD. They're worried about the THC, interfering with their ability to do the specific type of work they need to do as CEOs. Canada Provisions CEO Meg Sanders is a pot abstainer during the workday. She said, I needs to maintain my wits about me. But later on she may unwind with some marijuana. Ricardo Baca, who may be a recognizable name to many of you, he was the first U.S. journalist to cover marijuana full-time when he took on that beat for the Denver Post in 2013. 3 years later, after 20 years as a reporter, he switched sides and launching Grasslands, which is a PR agency of 11 full-time workers. He said cannabis now helps him deal with things they didn't have to worry about when he was a writer, things like budgets and profit and loss sheets, things that give him anxiety. He said, every morning I start with a couple of different multi-cannabinoid complexes. I think of them as vitamins. One is a straightforward derived CBD capsule. Takes a lot of CBD rather. Whitney Beatty, founder and CEO of Apothecary in Los Angeles, was a television executive before she launched her business selling attractive cannabis containers as home decor in 2015. She mostly uses CBD. Allison Gordon is the CEO of 48 North Cannabis Corporation, a producer and distributor of cannabis products in Toronto. She's been using marijuana since she was 15 years old. She hasn't built up a tolerance. So with more than 100 people relying on her to keep the lights on, even indulging even in the slightest puff on the job is totally out of the question for her. But not consuming after hours would be absurd, she says. Indeed, it would be the way that I work. And lead a company, it very much has to be something that I understand at every level, she said. They also talked to the co-founder of Kikoko, Amanda Jones. Kikoko is a cannabis-infused tea company. So go check that out. It's a pretty interesting story about CEOs. Really, it's a new day. I mean, I know it's a cliche, but, as people point out, things are cliched. And become cliches for a reason. The notion even 5 years ago, they would be talking to CEOs of any company, even a cannabis company, about them getting high before work or during work or, going home to get high or using CBD or any of this stuff would have been very odd. But in just a short amount of time, this is something that a lot of people are going to be surprised of or buy. And they shouldn't. I mean, if you run a cannabis company, it should be no surprise to no one that you use cannabis. It's not necessary. You can learn about cannabis without using it, obviously. But if you want to know more about its effects firsthand, well, obviously use is necessary. This last story is TexasTribune.org. Texas abruptly halts permitting process for new medical cannabis dispensaries. A week into opening the application process for medical cannabis dispensaries to apply for permits in Texas, the Texas Department of Public Safety, without warning, suspended the process. If you go to the department's website, and I did just before we started the show, it still says this, quote, the department's compassionate use program is not accepting applications at this time. The sudden announcement comes nearly a month after the state said it would keep the application process open for a month from October 1st to November 1st. Government agency does not follow through on their promise. That is very, very unique and odd. Hence, sense my sarcasm. If not, I'll point it out. It was sarcasm. The move by the state agency came as a shock to advocacy groups who were eager for the state to move forward on medical cannabis expansion months after the legislature expanded the list of conditions that qualify for the medicine under the compassionate use program. Includes seizure disorders, ALS, terminal cancer, and autism. Previously, the medicine was only available to people with intractable epilepsy who met certain requirements. DPS did not explain why the agency stopped accepting applications. An agency spokesperson wrote an email. The department will continue to assess dispensing capacity requirements, along with the need for any additional licenses as we work through the recent legislative changes to the program. A total of 43 applicants applied to receive preliminary licenses. At dispensing organizations in 2017, only 3 were accepted: Sutera, Texas, Consortium, Texas, and Compassionate Cultivation. So in other words, they've stopped the process, and they will get it back going when they feel like it. And they may or may not let you know when that is, if you're trying to apply for a medical marijuana license in Texas. The change is disappointing because many patients were looking forward to price shopping once the additional licenses were approved, said Jack Finkel, who's the executive director of Texas Normal. Patients pay thousands of dollars out of pocket since marijuana oil is not covered by insurance or Medicare, Finkel said. Additional licenses would create a better market for competition, she said, which is a theme we've talked about a lot, especially here in the last couple months on the show. More choice for consumers, more competition, more supply equals lower prices, which is good for cannabis consumers, which is who we should be focused on. I know we need to worry about equity for business owners and all these other things, but when you talk about the largest group out of all of these groups that we talk about, the largest group is cannabis consumers. We're talking tens of millions of people. And we need to be worried about them and what they have access to, because they make the whole engine run. Without that demand, there is no cannabis industry. There's no point in making it illegal if nobody uses it. Who would care? Because if you made something no one ever uses illegal, no one would bat an eye. But it's a big deal because a lot of people use it and a lot of people are criminalized for it. And we're trying to get past that. We need to focus on cannabis consumers and what's best for them. Yeah, expunging, records and allowing, people with records to be business owners and equity and reparations for the war on drugs, however you want to put it. All that's great. We'll talk about all that stuff. And that's, yes, all that. More people, more access, more entrepreneurs, all of it. But the reason for that is you want more choice for consumers, because that's the largest group. We're talking about tens of millions of people versus what? Thousands of cannabis owners? Hundreds of thousands of cannabis owners? Even them and all their employees is never going to be anywhere near as large as the group of cannabis consumers as a whole. And if things are going well for cannabis consumers and they're buying legal marijuana, well, it's better for everybody. Everybody's doing well. Everybody can make money. Everybody can have a successful cannabis business who wants one and is capable of running one. There's a lot of demand for cannabis. It's very popular right here. Someone told me that. The cannabis is very popular. I don't know. I guess so. This show is very popular. That's because of you all. Sharing, liking, commenting, all that stuff. Thank you to NatureSide, nature-side.com, and their organic, all-natural pesticides. Thank you to all of you for liking and sharing and commenting and all that stuff. Find us on YouTube and Vimeo if you want the video. Apple Podcasts, search the Marijuana Times on there for the audio version of this show. Thanks for watching and listening today. We'll see you next time right here on Cannabis News.